There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I am delighted to bring to you a dual purpose TBR. This year I am doing both Nonfiction November and Indigathon, because a lot of the nonfiction reading I was already planning to do for Nonfiction November would fit very nicely into Indigathon. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not following any prompts or bingo cards or anything for either readathon. I'm just reading the books that I want to read. But let's give a shout out to the wonderful organizers. Olive of a Book Olive has been doing, she created Nonfiction November. She's been doing it for years, and this year she's got some help. So not only a Book Olive, but also Sabrina at Steakachino. I don't think I've ever heard that channel name pronounced. I hope I got it right. Natalie at Curious Reader, and Jill at The Book Bully, and Andrea at Infinite Text. I'll put a link to their announcement videos and whatnot. And then for Indigathon, I don't think I even heard of Indigathon last year, but what a great idea. The co-hosts are, I'm assuming his name is Brody, his channel name is A2 Brody, and Michelle from Thor Wants Another Letter. I'll put their announcement videos and whatnot in the show notes below. So I'm really pumped. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to tell you about the buddy reads I have planned, and they all correspond to Nonfiction November. Then I'm going to tell you what I'm planning to read for Indigathon and Nonfiction November. And then I'm going to show you some other books that, I'm really hoping I can fit in as well. So let's get started. Here is a book that is the history of apple growing in the States and maybe Canada. I'm going to read more about it after I tell you what it is. The author is Helen Humphreys, and the book is The Ghost Orchard, The Hidden History of the Apple in North America. So there you go. Helen Humphreys is predominantly a fiction writer. Her novel, The Lost Garden, is one of my very most favorite novels. And she is Canadian, and I think she's now back in Canada. Yeah, she lives in Kingston, but she had lived in the UK for many years. I think I've got that right. It's a history of the apple. And I will be buddy reading this with Heidi of My Reading Life. How do you like them apples? And Britta Boulder and I will be buddy reading this, and I am so excited to read this. This is John Meacham's biography of John Lewis. His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. As everybody, I think, knows, John Lewis was a civil rights activist and later congressman, and he died earlier this year. And I loved him and learned even more about him in the wake of his death, and this book was published a few weeks later. John Meacham is a TV pundit. He's an avuncular historian that makes terrible historically inflected dad jokes on shows like Morning Joe and other MSNBC shows, and I groan all the time at his jokes, but I actually really like him. And I'm not attracted to older men, but John Meacham has the most beautiful eyes I think I've ever seen. So anyway, I've never read anything he's written, and John Lewis is one of my heroes, so I'm really looking forward to reading this brand new biography of the much lamented late John Lewis. And as a three-way buddy read with Brian of Bookish, Justin of Ghost Reader, and myself, we will be buddy reading a book that was co-authored by another booktuber. The book is Unspeakable, The Story of Junius Wilson, and the co-authors are Susan Birch and BookTube's own Hannah Joyner of Hannah's Books. She was very modest and didn't say anything about this book that she co-authored more than 10 years ago, until a long time after she came to BookTube, and when I got wind of it, I made this plan to buddy read it with those two fine fellows. And it is about a black man born 1908, died 2001, Junius Wilson, who spent 76 years in a state mental hospital in Goldsboro, North Carolina, including 6 in the criminal ward. He had never been declared insane by a professional, and he'd never been found guilty of any criminal charge, but spent that long under lock and key. And he was deaf and black in the Jim Crow South, and this book sounds heartbreaking, important, and amazing. And the last buddy read, but certainly not the least buddy read, not by a long shot, is Queen Mary, the official biography by James Pope Hennessy that I will be buddy reading with Leah. I just talked about it on a book haul that just went up a couple days ago, so I won't go on and on about it, but Leah and I read the sequel to this that was published a few years ago with all the dirt on the royals. This was the official biography that is still, everybody says, the most beautifully written royal biography, and based on the writing in the more recent addendum, James Pope Hennessy was an incredibly talented writer. And Queen Mary is just, she's Queen Mary. If you don't know, she's the Queen's grandma, and they were very similar, kind of boring personalities, very staid, but more to them than meets the eye. I just can't wait to get into this, and it is a chunky bugger. Leah and I are planning to do it all in 1 month. So now here are the 3 books that I'm planning to do that are books about Indigenous history or nonfiction that will be both for Nonfiction November and especially for Indigathon. This is a history of the Indigenous uprising in Saskatchewan, the province in Canada where I am from. Loyal Till Death, Indians and the Northwest Rebellion, which was in 1885 in what later became Saskatchewan. Co-authored by Blair Stonechild and Bill Weiser. So Blair Stonechild I don't know anything about other than that he is Indigenous. And I'm just really glad that this was co-authored by an Indigenous historian as well as a non-Indigenous historian. Stonechild is a member of the Moscow Petang Band. I'm sorry, I've never heard that word before. Don't know how to pronounce it. In southern Saskatchewan. And he is, at the time of publication, he was the head of the Department of Indian Studies at the University of Regina. And Bill Weiser, at the time of publication, and actually when I was a history student at the University of Saskatchewan, in the mid-80s, he was the chair of the history department at the University of Saskatchewan, and at the time of this publication he still was, and this was 1997, but this edition, the revised edition 2010, so that means he might still be the head of, because he's still publishing books, and later in his career he has specialized not only in Saskatchewan history, I think he always did, but on Indigenous history. And the 1885 rebellion, this is the one that Louis Riel was the leader, the main leader, and I studied it in elementary school, and what a warped, ridiculously colonialist view I learned about then, and never really learned another blessed thing about it until I read another book this year that sparked my curiosity to know much, much more about what this was all about. And again, really excited that it's a collaboration between a Indigenous historian and a settler historian. And I'm so excited about this one. This is Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun, Portraits of Everyday Life in 8 Indigenous Communities by Paul Cisequasis. So Paul Cisequasis is a Willow Cree writer and archivist, photographic archivist, living in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He curated this book and wrote the narratives that go with the photos that he collected. And I will link to a interview that I saw with him that made me buy the book, and I was delighted that, as hateful as Amazon is, that Amazon Japan had a copy of this book in stock here in Tokyo that I could get the next day. As Canada has been coming to terms with our horrifically, genocidally racist founding and many, many sins since the founding of our country and the expelling of Indigenous peoples off the land so that we could screw it up royally. There has been a ferment and a truth-telling going on in Canadian society and within Indigenous cultures across Canada that has been extremely painful. And Cisequasis wanted to balance that extremely important process and dialogue with a celebration of everyday life within Indigenous communities. And with that goal in mind, collected photographs and then researched the stories to go with them, and has written this beautiful book that shows Indigenous people being themselves, living their lives. And I just absolutely love the project. Look at that one, hey? So this photo has all of the people named in it. It's a group of children from the Dene Nation in the Northwest Territories in 1968. That photo just fills me with joy. And there will be an accompanying narrative that Cisa Quasis has written about those people. This is going to be a joyous read. I can't wait. And the last one that would also qualify for the Indigathon this year is a graphic novel, Paying the Land, by Joe Sacco. And this is huge. This is like a textbook size. And chunky. It's 260 pages. And it is about the Dene people in the Mackenzie River Valley, which is in the subarctic Canadian Northwest Territories. And it is about the struggle of the Dene people amidst all of the challenges of resource development, environmental devastation, and all the racist bullshit that they have had to live with way up north. Joe Sacco is not Indigenous. He has created socially conscious graphic novels about the Gaza Strip, World War I, and so on. He lives in Portland, but this is his humongous graphic novel. I guess, I don't know what to call it. Is it a graphic nonfiction book? I guess it is. He is called a comics reporter, a masterly work of comics journalism about Indigenous North America, resource extraction, and our debt to the national world. So, that should be absolutely incredible. So that's what I'm doing for Indigathon. Can't wait. I think I can read more than that. So I have a few more to show you and talk about. And I know I won't get to all of them, but I hope to get to some of them. I'm going to show them to you in the order of my priority of what I really want to get to. So the next one is about another recent interest, is too limp of a word, but preoccupation of mine, which is in the wake of the George Floyd killing and the Black Lives Matter, Defund the Police movement that has swept across North America, if not the world. I have become much more aware of how evil the institution of policing is, certainly in North America, certainly for people who are not white. So here is a book that I found out about that is about how evil the Canadian police are, and it is written by one of their very own. It's called Police Line Do Not Cross, Silencing a Canadian Police Whistleblower by Kelly Donovan. And I think this is one that, again, I hate Amazon, but I just happened to find it when I was searching for stuff on Amazon. So the author, Kelly Donovan, was a police officer in Ontario, Canada. And she blew the whistle on how corrupt and violent and I'm not sure what, abusive the police force was, or at least certain people in the police force. And she spoke out about it, and this is a book about what happened to her. So, it should be a very intense, very educational read. Defund the Police. One of my favorite authors that I've discovered since I came to BookTube is the gay British writer Denton Welch, who died in about 1948 or something after being severely injured in a bicycle. He was riding a bicycle truck accident about 15 years before that, and he never really recovered from his injuries. And the remainder of his life, while he did write a lot and lived a full life, he was quite seriously disabled and lots of health problems, and died very young, he was about 40 or something when he died. And I've read 2 novels by him, both of which I absolutely loved. His debut novel, In Youth is Pleasure. I have a full review of that. I'll put a link in the show notes. And his last novel, in fact, it was not quite finished when he died, A Voice Through a Cloud. And both of those just obliterated me. I loved them so much. And I haven't read... He's only got maybe 2 other books, a bunch of short stories and his journals. But this is a collection of the letters between him and his husband, although there was no gay marriage in the day. Good Night, Beloved Comrade, The Letters of Denton Welch to Eric Oliver. Edited by Daniel J. Murtaugh. And I've had it on my shelf for a couple of years, and it's only 120 pages plus about that many pages worth of notes. And I think it's going to be a really beautiful, beautiful read. Oh, it has a real new book smell. I've barely opened it since I got it. So yeah, they were lovers. And, Denton Welch was only 33 when he died. So he was maybe not even 20 when he had that terrible accident. And he was also a painter. He met and fell in love with Eric Oliver in 1943 during the Blitz. And they were together for the last 6 years of Denton Welch's life. And these are the letters he wrote to him. I'm already getting all verklempt. This is Denton Welch. Yes, I have to get to this, because I haven't read any other Denton Welch books this year. So this will be my Denton Welch book for 2020. I would love to get to these last 4, and probably won't get to more than maybe one of them. And these ones, last 4, in not really a particular order. But this is a short biography of the Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, by the apparently absolutely stunningly gifted Polish journalist Richard Kapuscinski. And I've never read anything by Kapuscinski. I got more interested in modern Ethiopian history and Emperor Haile Selassie in particular when I read this book about a year ago, the biography of the Pankhurst women that were the suffragette family by Martin Pugh. And one of the daughters, Sylvia Pankhurst, after the suffrage was achieved in the UK, or at least partially achieved, she turned her energies towards Ethiopian liberation during the war because it was invaded by Italy. And then she was so passionate about it that she moved to Ethiopia and lived the last 10 or 15 years of her life there, and was given full honorary citizenship by the emperor. And her son is still there, and Richard Pankhurst, still very prominent cultural figure in Ethiopia. So that made me more curious than I already was about Haile Selassie, and this is a very short little kind of biography or journalistic book about him. So give it a try. And then that will be a nice bridge to, I eventually, probably not this year, maybe early next year, want to get to The Shadow King by Maza Mengiste, which is, I think it's on the short list for the Booker. I've had it for long before the Booker long list came out. I've had it for the better part of 2020. Haven't gotten to it, but I thought that reading the Haile Selassie biography, after learning quite a bit about Ethiopia from this biography, and then read this, that I would be all set to dive into The Shadow King. I think it was earlier this year or late last year, I read the British author Mary Wesley's debut novel. Her debut novel from 1983 was called Jumping the Queue, and I read it in the last year or so, and I didn't like it, actually. It wasn't very good. But what I learned about her life while researching, Googling this and that, at the time that I read the book, made me far more interested in her life than in her writing. So I have this biography, Wild Mary, A Life of Mary Wesley by Patrick Marnham. And I don't know if I'll get to it this month, but if not, I'll get to it later. But her life was fascinating, and now I can't remember why. That was so long ago. Let's see. She had a tempestuous relationship with her parents and siblings, and her first husband became a baron. She had 2 kids. The second son from that marriage became the literary agent of this biographer, according to Wikipedia. I need to know more about that. This Wikipedia entry is so terrible. It doesn't even say whether Baron Swinfen, her first husband, died or whether they were divorced, but she married again and had another kid. And after he died, she was dirt poor, and it was then that she started writing. She was not a writer until then. And it goes from there. I think her life continued to be crazy, dramatic, and fascinating. And I would try one of her later novels. Her first one was just really not very good, but lots of great writers wrote terrible debuts, so people say. And then 2 short ones. This was a gift from my friend Leah. Just got it a few weeks ago. Some Country Houses and Their Owners by James Lees Milne. And she said, James Lees Milne, because I wouldn't necessarily think that I'm interested in reading a book about country houses. I'm not that architecturally inclined. I mean, I like looking at pictures of nice houses, and if given a chance to tour some of them, but it's not my thing. But she says, she wrote, she won't mind me telling you, this is one sentence from her little post-it note about the author, James Lees Milne. He's almost as catty as us. So, yeah, I'm interested. And she said it's the kind of book you can pick up and put down because it's just entries of this house and that house you could read. There's no through narrative. James Lees Milne, I think he was playing on my team, wasn't he? He's a big homo. Let's find out. If he's as catty as me and Leah, he must be gay. Born 1908, died 1997. English writer and expert on country houses. An architectural historian, novelist, and biographer. Okay, if might want to check out his novels. His extensive diaries remain in print. He was bisexual, and Wikipedia is doing much better with the James Lees Milne biography because it says he was visiting Diana, Lady Maulesley. That's the Diana Mitford who married the fascist. The Mitford I don't really like because she married a fascist. And he was at her house when Edward VIII abdicated, and they listened to his broadcast together and crying. And he was boyfriends with the Mitford brother, Tom Mitford. Oh my. So yeah, need to know more about James Lees Milne. And this looks like a fun short little read for Nonfiction November. And lastly, I find out about a lot of books on Twitter, and I tend to be kind of an insomniac. I often wake up in the middle of the night and I'm awake for 2 or 3 hours and eventually go back to sleep, and I do a lot of browsing on Twitter at that time. And I bought a book from a press I'd never heard of, and it was like $10, and it was a small little micro press. I had just enough money in my PayPal account to order it. It looked like it would be something I could do for Women in Translation Month last year. But I needed to have had a cup of coffee before I placed the order because it's not a translated text at all. So maybe I'll try to do it for Nonfiction November. It is called A Luminous History of the Palm by Jessie Sequeira. And Jessie Sequeira is a translator, and she lives in both Chile and Cambridge in the UK. But this is written in English, and it is about a series of small portraits through time, all of which include a palm tree, but it can also be read as a revolutionary tract. It's from Sublunary Editions. It might be a little bit too precious for me, but I'm going to give it a try. Little bite-sized essays that all have some connection to the palm. Not the palm tree, I guess. So that is my very ambitious. Before this is edited, people, it's 38 minutes, almost 39 minutes, so I got some serious editing to do, and I can't wait for Nonfiction November and Indigathon. Thanks for watching.